Welcome to Career Tipper Podcast, hosted by Michelle Beatty. The Career Tipper Podcast is a motivational resource that shares career and entrepreneurial tips by industry experts that will help amazing people evolve to their professional best. And now your host, Michelle Beatty.
Episode 42 of the Career Tipper Podcast features Orlando Haynes. Orlando is a veteran that has over 15 years of experience that includes corporate and agency recruiting. He has worked in a variety of recruiting roles, from U.S. recruiting manager to branch manager. Orlando has worked with an array of professional disciplines ranging from administrative to engineering, finance and accounting, medical, and nonprofit. Orlando has a well-rounded perspective of what hiring managers are looking for in candidates and how recruiters manage them. Orlando is committed to the process of helping candidates go from job seeker to the sought-after candidate. He is a published author and speaker for all things career development. During this episode, Orlando will share insight and behind-the-scenes information from the eyes of an active recruiter. I'm your host, Michelle Beatty, professional development author and coach. Orlando, welcome to the Career Tipper Podcast.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you for having me.
This is going to be a good one. So, Orlando, please share what led you to having career longevity as a recruiter.
Absolutely. I would definitely say a commitment and a love for the industry. I fell into recruiting about 15 years ago, a little over 15 years now, by accident. I was a candidate, and I was just intrigued by the way the agency that ultimately recruited me for an internal position, how they treated me as a candidate throughout that process. And ultimately, 6 months later, within meeting them the first time, they actually called me back to join the team, which was extremely surprising because I had no clue what recruiting was. But that started my career back in, I would say, 2003. And it's been a full ride ever since. I enjoyed every aspect of recruiting, both corporate and the agency side, the process itself, the speaking with candidates. And it sounds very nostalgic, but just putting someone in a career that they love, ultimately, when they call you and say, hey, this is the one that I needed and I appreciate it, I'm able to put food on the table for my family. I mean, that is the ultimate satisfaction in this role.
Fantastic. Now, from a recruiter's perspective, please share what prep work job seekers and career changers need to do prior to contacting a recruiter.
Absolutely. First prep work, what I typically tell folks is you need to bring your A game. And what I mean by that is, yes, you should have a professional resume, also a professional LinkedIn profile that should match your resume. And most folks, you may hear a difference in opinion on that, but I still think as a recruiter, that's one of the key platforms we look for and go to in the beginning. So we want to make sure that it's run parallel with your resume, that there's no gaps or red flags that you're putting on one piece of paper versus the LinkedIn. The second is making sure you knowing what recruiting firm you're wanting to work with, right? Making sure that they specialize in the skill set that you're specialized in. You don't just want to go to a mom and pop shop. More than likely, those folks will not have the reach or the relationships needed to get you an opportunity or even to get you in front of a potential employer. So you want to do your due diligence in that space there. And number three would definitely be stay professional. These recruiters around the world, these are sharp individuals, and we are gatekeepers to your career path. So keep in mind that don't take that conversation lightly. Be very professional with a recruiter. The more professional you are and the more put together you are, the more likely we will become your ally and work very hard to put you in an opportunity that best suits you.
Love it. Now, what do you encourage candidates to keep in mind when communicating with recruiters and setting expectations that, when it comes to job lead outcomes? Because they can be like, okay, this is it. You're going to call me tomorrow with 5 job leads and I'm going to start interviewing. So what do you want them to keep in mind?
That's a great question. So I would first tell folks, don't come with a sense of entitlement because recruiters, we don't create the jobs. Our job is to match you to an opportunity. So we don't create the jobs just because you may have your master's or PhD or whatever the case may be, your credentials are top notch. We still don't have that power to create the opportunity for you. Keep in mind, it takes time, right? You're not the only job seeker we work with, especially if you're working with a recruiter who works in a staffing agency. More than likely, they can have a job requisition log that could be upwards of 5 to 10 to 15 positions at a time. If it's a corporate recruiter, those folks who work strictly for one organization, now they're looking at, a multitude of resumes just like any recruiter, but you just know that you're not the only job seeker out there. So you can't assume that you're on our top list all the time, because we have to be able to navigate and juggle multiple clients and multiple job opportunities and multiple candidates at the same time. So be patient, but definitely, as I mentioned before, be polished, be professional, bring your A game, and we'll go to bat for you as best as possible.
Fantastic. Now, Orlando, you have authored several books on career search. Please share an overview of your books with the listeners, because you have a few resources out there for them that they can invest in.
Yes, great question, Michelle. So the first book was a book that I solely authored and published. It's called Inside Career Tips for all Job Seekers Should Know. So Inside Career Tips for All Job Seekers Should Know. And that's really, it's back to basics and fundamentals in that book. Depending on where you're at in your career, it may seem, kind of like, I don't need to know this. But for someone coming out of college or someone who's been in the career professional world for several years and just hasn't interviewed in a while, it's a good reference point to go back to, because I touch on topics like job fair, preparing before an interview, simple things like know the routes to where you're going to go, prepare your attire the day before, all these little simple steps that people tend to forget. Very, very basic stuff, but it's insightful because I notice a lot of job seekers miss these basic opportunities, doing the due diligence with the company you're going to work for, preparing your pitch, preparing your responses, etc. The second book, that was a collaborative book. So that one is called Mastering Your Career Journey, 11 Career Professionals Unveil the Secrets to Success. So what I've done with that one, I reached out to 10 other career professionals. Some were corporate recruiters, others were certified professional resume writers. Another young lady in the book was also worked for a nonprofit. One was a DISC certified facilitator as well. So we had an eclectic group. We answered about 11 to 12 questions, and we all gave our different perspective on when it comes to, and this is just questions we've all gotten throughout our career, whether about career transition, when's the best time, how do I know if I'm experienced, when should I ask for a raise, how do I discuss salary negotiations. So we each gave our own perspective on those several questions that we got, and it's been received pretty well. The book is on Amazon and as well as Barnes and Nobles, and we also have one of our books, that particular book actually, as a career reference guide with FSU. So we're definitely excited about that.
Oh, congratulations on that. That's awesome. Now, the workforce landscape is changing and the freelancing percentage is on the rise. So what insight do you encourage candidates to consider when reviewing freelance opportunities?
That's a great question, Michelle. What I would first tell folks is make sure you're in a skill set that you can take to the freelance space. Ideally, you want to make sure that it's something that the market will receive. So now we're talking about freelance / most people call it a side hustle. What I like to think is what Warren Buffett said: anything that you love, make it a hobby. Anything that the world loves, make it a business. So if it's something that that it can be a market gap that you do, even if it's administrative, because almost, depending on the skill set, even if you're an administrative assistant, there is a market for that. You see a lot of entrepreneurs such as us launching our careers, launching our businesses, and they may need additional support. If you're a social media person, be creative, create a landing page for yourself. Utilize LinkedIn to promote those skills, make the connections, get networked, go to different networking events, be specific and intentional about which events you go to. This way you can get that advice, seek a mentor. That's huge. That's never going to go out of style. Knowing someone who can guide you in the right direction while you're still looking for a 9 to 5, you can be growing your business at the same time. That seems to be the big trend now. But just making sure that you do have a skill set that you know how to market and package and price it and put it into the market.
Oh, thank you, Orlando, for sharing that. Let's address career image and all the factors that contribute to being polished beyond the presentation and beyond the resume.
Absolutely. When I think about image, I think about the word branding. Now, we all have, that's a big, big word where people believe it's, you talk about a logo or this and that, how you dress, how your resume should look, how your LinkedIn should look, how you conduct yourself. I like to think the best example of image, which I link to branding, is what Jeff Bezos said. He said, your brand is what people say about you once you left the room. So that's your image. That's the stamp you're leaving with folks. How did you conduct yourself? What was your work ethic like? Just overall, how do you present yourself? Making sure you're not presenting two people. You're one person with your buddies, and then you're another person, in the professional world. At some point, the two may overlap and connect, and it may be a debacle, maybe a train wreck happening there. So be your authentic self. And again, the market, there's ups and downs, and we're all not Mark Zuckerberg where we can wear T-shirts and jeans every day. So we basically, for the most part, if you're in the corporate world, you have to mirror image that corporate look. But staying professional and keeping a good image is really just being authentic. In my mind, being professional, and just staying true to yourself. Be consistent in what you're doing and how you portray yourself. Do not flip-flop, and then your image now becomes tainted.
So as a recruiter, how do you perceive social media impacting that? Because I know sometimes job seekers feel like what they post on social media should not impact their perception professionally. So what's your takeaway on those perspectives?
Here's the thing on that, because what employees need to start doing is start thinking like an employer. So once we change our mindset, it stops coming from the place of lack or the place of an employee. Like I said, think of it as an employer. So employers look at every individual they bring into their company as an ambassador of that organization. You just never know, right? People say one of the most important positions is the administrative assistant. If they have a front desk receptionist that will greet any guest that comes through the door, it's just as important as the CEO. So if you're a receptionist greeting folks, but then you're out and about posting stuff on your social media, Facebook, etc., where employers do look to make sure that you're presenting yourself, your image is what you portrayed it to be in that interview process to land that opportunity, then we have to know that it's consistent. To say, okay, that's not a problem. Now, I hire you, you're seen in a provocative manner or unprofessional manner, and then a client happens to see that at a local restaurant or at a bar, and you're drinking, you're loud. Now they can come back and say, hey, I've seen XYZ. Is that the kind of people you hire? And then that can taint kind of damage the image of the organization as a whole. So that's why it's extremely important. I used to teach on stuff called, the social media cleanup, like a spring cleaning of the social media. If you're in the corporate world, be careful. I would say lock all your personal photos. Like you can go to mine. It's nothing but professional stuff. You may see a couple of family photos, but nothing crazy. Nothing that someone would be like, oh, that's not the image I want.
So what's crazy, Orlando? Give some examples of quote unquote what is people will find unprofessional.
If you're half dressed, too much showing. If you're inebriated and it just looks very, very obvious that you're inebriated, slouching, just it could be something that your political stance. I mean, the climate of this of America now is so extremely sensitive. You just never know. But for the ground level stuff, I would say, again, if you're dressed inappropriately, completely, man or female, if you're dressed inappropriately, it'll just send that message wrong. Like, okay, you're a suit and tie person or professional dress, high heels here or out in just in public. And I can understand folks may think, well, that's my personal life, but just be careful. We're not saying change your personal life. We're just saying you don't have to publicize it because it can hurt your professional life as well. And unfortunately, that's just the way it is, because employers will look and recruiters will look. If they can find you on a basic social media like Facebook, that has popped up. I've seen it happen.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, but thank you for sharing that, and thank you for expounding upon that. How do you keep up with industry and candidate trends?
That's a great question. A lot of it, I would say the trends is, I'm reading a lot that's just on social media, on the LinkedIn's, the different groups that I try to follow to make sure when it comes to artificial intelligence, we may get into that. And then speaking with candidates, trying to go to different events, whether it be an HR event, or sometimes I'll go outside of my industry and just go to a business networking event and engage in several conversations with executives or anyone, and get their perspective on what's going on. So it's an array of different things. I couldn't tell anyone it's a one career path, like to say, hey, stay on LinkedIn or stay on the news, and you'll get all the latest and greatest trends. Not necessarily. Sometimes you have to talk to people on the ground level to see what's coming, and especially within your area or city. This way you can follow it more closely and then kind of see if you can tweak if you're whatever profession you're in, to kind of stay current as it comes.
No, that makes sense. Now, what is your wellness tip that keeps you alert and continually helping job seekers become sought after?
It's a great question. My wellness tip kind of goes back to a little bit of what I said, because my focus is really going to be about developing candidates in their just overall business acumen. Again, the resume is fine. The LinkedIn, that can be taken care of very, very quickly. But I think what I see is that folks, college graduates coming out, kind of about to graduate, and professionals again, that been working for so long and haven't been in an interview, they lost a sense of what's out there, or don't have a sense of what's out there and how to navigate that. Also looking at, once you're in a corporate setting, how do you conduct yourself? So it's really, that's my focus, to keep those people well versed, to say, hey, this is what this is what managers are looking for. So I want to give you a good overview and break it down as much as possible so I can prepare you for what's to come.
No, that's awesome. Now, I appreciate you being a guest on the Career Tipper podcast. And we just, in every episode, with the guests sharing their favorite quote or affirmation that keeps them creating career tipping moments. So what's your favorite quote or affirmation, Orlando?
That's a great question. So it's probably something I made up myself, or at least I'll tell people that, right? Is your grind has to exceed your talent. You can be extremely talented, get accolades, but if you're not working at your craft, you will not grow. So it doesn't matter if you're a LeBron James, a Michael Jordan, or whoever in the professional world, the Bill Gates of the world, and Zuckerbergs, etc. Those people who may have natural talent, but if they did not work hard, they would not achieve the success that they achieved. So I'm always thinking grinding exceeds talent. So it's just a work ethic. If you're not working, you're not growing. Your talent will leave you. And then what do you have left is nothing but your work ethic.
So true. Now, please share how the listeners can get in touch with you.
Absolutely. So you can reach me on my website. That'll be orlandohaynes.com. My Instagram is Orlando_Haynes1. My LinkedIn profile is Orlando Haynes. I'm not too much on Twitter anymore, or Snapchat, or any of those other platforms. Those are the main three platforms that you can reach me on. So website again, orlandohaynes.com. My IG account, Orlando_Haynes1, and then LinkedIn, Orlando Haynes.
Fantastic. And you can find me, Michelle Beatty, at careertipper.com, on Facebook and Instagram at CareerTipper, and on Twitter at CareerTipper1. Please listen and subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, Spotify, and Stitcher Radio. If you enjoyed this episode or any other episode of the Career Tipper podcast, please leave us a 5-star review on iTunes. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Career Tipper podcast. We're grateful for our listeners and guests. For more resources about how to evolve to your professional best, share your comments and feedback about this episode and your suggestions for future guests, visit careertipper.com. Until next time, be confidently you.